adding color, that's really the purpose of idioms then. And if you're going to add color, add it positively. Don't make any use of the negative idioms, because I mean the language you use really does matter. The words that you use to describe a situation, if you can choose neutral or positive words for it, then choose that, because choosing negative words just it colors them all gray and blue, and it's sad.
Hello.
Hi. We're going to have a conversation today for our podcast, and in way of introduction, I suppose I would like to introduce everyone to a problem that I have. That I think I didn't know I had it until somebody introduced me to that it was a problem, I suppose.
Wow. Do you think other people are living with it too? Don't tell me the problem yet, but is it a problem that most everyone lives with, but we just don't know?
I don't believe that most anyone has this problem, and even if they were introduced to it, maybe they would think it was a stupid problem, and it's actually not a problem. It's not something to be worried about, for sure. They would maybe push back so far to say, no, it's important that we have these things in our lives.
Yeah, so
Which I expect you're going to have that position.
Okay. Are you somewhat subconscious about it?
Subconscious? Or self-conscious?
Self-conscious about it, yeah. Subconsciously self-conscious? Somewhat self-conscious,
no,
that's what I mean.
I'm not self-conscious at all about it.
All right.
Because I believe that I am right. So any effort that I make, I'm happy. I'm happy with it.
Well, that's good. Now that we have concerted ourselves with all the things we think it could be and all the bad that it could be, what's your issue?
I believe that when people use idioms or phrases or like 1 or 2 or 3 word metaphors, I mean, there's a lot of things that could fit into all of that.
Okay.
That bundle of stuff. I think it detaches the user from what's actually happening and makes life worse, actually. I think using idioms in every sentence that you speak and type, write, makes life worse. That's what I believe.
Okay.
Now, as I've been thinking about this in the last several years, I recognize that many people will say, no way, these are necessary for understanding. I mean, this is part of our culture, our society, and without these, you'll lose a level of understanding between people, between organizations that is necessary. I don't know. What do you think? What are your thoughts first?
Understanding. So that was the question I had about it is it tend to decline or it's worse for the situation because it's hard to understand? Some people may not understand the real meaning. You're using
Absolutely.
Using an idiom because it doesn't attach the actual. Well, you need to define what an idiom is. I had to look that up. So what an idiom is, it's using things that you can't logically attach the meaning for what you just said to the situation you're talking about. There's no logical connection whatsoever.
Right. You say a bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush. That's a saying. Is that an idiom? Like you could try and convince somebody using that saying.
You're not talking about birds, and you don't even know what the bush is that you're talking about.
It's an illustrative phrase, but...
Yeah, and it means something, but it may mean different things. The one that was in the description that I read was, it's raining cats and dogs.
Oh, yes.
I mean, you know what that means. Everyone knows what that means when you say it, but never will it rain cats and dogs. It will rain meatballs and gumballs, but not cats and dogs. Gumballs, wasn't that the movie?
Yes, Gumballs in Bedtime Stories, Meatballs in Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs.
Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, yeah.
And cats and dogs, I don't know if I've ever seen a movie that actually does that. But that was in an episode of The Office, though, where Jim had a clipboard with all of the sayings that Phyllis says when it's raining. And you can find a clip of this online, but she comes in and she says, "Gosh, it's raining cats and dogs out there." And that was like the first thing they checked off the clipboard. If she says everything on the clipboard without knowing about the game,
Yeah.
everybody in the office earns hot chocolate. So they were all
Okay.
trying to get her to say all of these things. Is hilarious.
About it raining. It's raining today. What do you think about that?
Yeah. Raining cats and dogs. That's the example that they used in the idiom thing.
Right. And as an example of what an idiom actually is, it just means it's raining a whole lot. Something, an unreasonable amount of rain.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that's what it's like, surprising how much it's raining,
Yeah.
Maybe.
It wouldn't surprise you anymore if there were cats and dogs falling from the sky. That's kind of what
Yes.
that means, right?
Yeah. So when someone just says that, like you can't understand without further inspection whether they're upset about how much it's raining, or if they're surprised actually, or if they're happy, or if it's just something that they're saying because people say it. And it's like you're completely apathetic to the rain, but you just have to have something to say. So
And maybe that's what would be wrong with it. It's just people who want to keep saying things.
small talk maybe.
Small talk. They just want to have something to say about every event. And so they relate something that doesn't relate as an idiom. There are those common idioms like raining cats and dogs. But if someone starts speaking in idioms, and maybe an idiom is a show quote that no one else really knows.
Like, what, I fart in your general direction. Like, would you know where that is?
I have no idea what that
that's
comes
from?
So no, in your general direction. It means I'm talking to you generally. No, I don't know whether that means that. I would tend to suppose it could mean that you're talking about, talking instead of actual flatulation.
Right. It's meant as an offense in this particular situation. They're taunting someone on the other side of the wall and just saying things like this. There's a bunch of other things surrounding it, but that's the main quote that most people quote from this scene. But it's from Monty Python and the Quest for the Holy Grail.
The Holy Grail, okay. And there's a lot of idioms in that show.
So many.
A hedge. What do you do with a hedge? I don't know. A shrubbery. That's what it is, a shrubbery. And it's funny. Maybe are idioms funny? Are they meant to be funny or descriptive?
I think some of them are meant to be funny, and the origination of them are meant to be descriptive. I think the reason they exist is because somebody was using it to illustrate, to drive home a point, Benjamin Franklin's thing that he wrote in the papers, what is it called?
Poor Richard's Almanac?
Yeah, he would include things like that in his almanac. Like there was a whole introduction that was included at the end of his autobiography that was filled with idioms. And it's just, of that time, it was filled with phrases that meant something to people, maybe helps people understand the general idea of what the idea that's trying to be conveyed, I guess.
And we can say in a little different direction, a little different way, that seems to be useful. Trying to describe something, you can say what you mean, but then if you can use a flavor of that meaning to something else.
Add some color to it, maybe.
Add color. The color, what do they call those people that talk on sports events?
Yeah, color commentators.
Yeah. So they're just speaking idioms.
It keeps people watching, I think. Maybe there's a brand of people that just don't listen when people are saying what they actually mean. And so it's useful to add color to what you're saying so that they pay attention.
Yeah, or you can use a word that doesn't really match, that rhymes with it. Rhymes, not necessarily rhyming like poetry, but is close enough that you can gather the direction, but you have to think about it to make the connection. Like that. I can't even say the word that you used earlier. That I'm going to use it. I'm going to say it, but I just let you know it's hard for me. Farting in your general direction. Someone who doesn't use that word or wouldn't talk about that at any time will have a difficult time, but it means something to him. And I would roll it to, it means he's talking across the wall. He's yelling at you through the wall or something.
Right. So also, I remember when I was growing up, we'd call them floofs. Is that
Floofs.
because you
Yeah,
just
okay.
don't like the word fart?
Right. Yeah, I wouldn't use the word. I wouldn't use that word. And I don't still.
I know there were several like crass words. They weren't swear words. They were just like crap and fart and things like and shut up. We weren't I don't think that I think we were encouraged not to say the word shut up because they were too difficult. You could say shush, but you can't say shut up.
And they do have their point. I mean, I'll use those words. I think I have used those words a time or two, and we talked about that in the past, to emphasize, to be emphatic. But idioms aren't necessarily to be emphatic. Those are curse words. Those are exclamations. An idiom you use to be maybe dramatic. You're adding more drama to what you're trying to say, more color. I once did use a word. I was in a professional business setting, and I was talking about how people work together, how we can work together. And I think I used the word coagulate. We need to coagulate this, or maybe there's a harder word than that. I used a word like cottage cheese would do. Collaborate. I think it was collaborate or coagulate. It had to be coagulate because collaborate would make sense in a business setting. Coagulate is that's what
Kind of a food thing.
food items do. Yeah. So I used a food description in a business setting, and they said that didn't work. And it says, I think it means exactly what I wanted it to mean. We're taking these different parts and we're going to be different because we do this together. Something like that. Kind of the idea of synergy that we talked about with 7 Habits.
Okay.
Something new comes out, something new coagulates with it. And you can use synergize in a business setting instead of coagulate.
Uh-huh. Yes, you can.
That's kind of idiom, and an idiot use of the word idiom, of an idiom.
Uh-huh.
The most famous quote, and do you know the most famous quote for idioms? My most famous quote.
Well, I'm sure I would be like, oh yeah, once you say it.
It's Pink Panther. So what's the Pink Panther idiom quote?
So the Steve Martin Pink Panther or the old show Pink Panther?
It's the Steve Martin, yeah, not the who's the other Pink Panther? Steve Martin, Pink Panther, and he says he's not dead. It says whatever it was. He's pushing up daisies. He's not pushing up daisies. He's dead. He said
Yes.
it's an idiom. He says you sir are the idiom.
Oh, I love it.
He's not pushing up daisies. He's dead. That's what that means. It's an idiom.
Right.
You idiot.
Pushing up daisies. Yeah, that would be an idiom that, it illustrates, it makes light of something. It dances around what you actually mean, right? You don't actually, and that's another idiom, dances around. See, I just used one. Sometimes they just slip in.
It dances around because it doesn't move. It's a word. Or like rhymes with is kind of an idiom too, but it relates somehow.
Yeah, if you're not actually saying cat rhymes with bat, like if you're using it as an illustration to convey your meaning.
But dances around because that's not a literal thing.
Right.
I'm thinking it's a bigger problem for someone whose English is a second language or any language is their second language.
Well, certainly, yeah.
If they come across idioms in that, cats and dogs, raining? That doesn't make any sense. What do you mean? That can't be what you mean by what you're saying. Because I know the word cat, dog, and rain, and those don't mix.
There's no...
You can't have a cat, dog, rain on something.
Yeah, that's very true. I think maybe I might be a little bit afraid of trying to become fluent in another language because of all of in order to speak fluently, you need to speak idioms.
You'd have to understand the culture. And is culture idioms then?
Yeah, I think so. Because what idioms Americans, United States people, whatever idioms we have in our country or even in our state, doesn't translate to Sweden.
Right, doesn't translate, but it doesn't some ways translate to the different region of the country. I mean, Idaho idioms are different than Missouri idioms. They're different. Texas is its own country as far as what they talk about or how they say things.
What their speech, yeah.
I just had a call today from a scam artist, of course, and you know that I love to talk to those people. I was just enjoying the conversation, indicating there's no way you're from the bank because the bank would never talk with me like you're talking with me. And he said, well, I assure you I am. This is not a scam. I have information I could scam you with. But and I said, well, go ahead, continue with your scam. And he said, you have made a purchase for a certain amount this morning. And I said, mad. In your script, is it spelled M-A-D-E? Because in America, we say made when you read that word. You have made a purchase. He said, and I said, no, that's not right. You got to get your voices right, or the words right. You pronounce that made if you're in the United States.
You gave him an English lesson, and now he's going to succeed at his next call.
No, he used the appropriate phrase that people use whenever they get upset with you and want to leave your company. That starts with an F-U.
He said that to you?
To me, yeah, on the phone, and then he hung up. So, I know it was a scam because any real bank person would never do that. They don't get upset. They say, this is a serious issue. Please call us back at this number and we'll prove to you that this is who we are. The scams don't have that option.
Right.
And I don't know, that was just fun. That was just the word mad. But he said it 3 or 4 times. You have mad this. You did it yourself. You mad it this morning. I think that you're trying to say made, and you don't got that. You don't have that right.
Right. So, yeah, you kind of tip your hand when you use idioms incorrectly, right? There's another idiom. You
tip your hand.
Show your hand. Yeah. And I used it wrong too. It's show your hand. It's tip your hat, right?
Tip your hat.
That's
show your hand. But tip your hand. It made total sense. That made sense.
You kind of show your background. You're illustrating where you come from, in a way,
and
because
what type of person you are.
Right. I would definitely be an outsider in another country, even though I was trying really hard to speak fluently. I wouldn't be able to speak the lingo of the culture,
You wouldn't sound like a local.
Yeah.
And maybe that's fluency. Fluency means you sound like a local. You can operate like a local.
Well, that'd be the goal.
You mentioned tip your hand. I think tip your hand would be the right way to say it. We could look that up.
Is it?
Because tip your hat is not really an idiom. It's a what do you call those? It's something you do. You normally tip your hat. It's not used as an idiom. It's a convenience, a courtesy, an item of courtesy to tip your hat. To tip your hand is to be courteous, but showing something you didn't want to show. That's in poker. You're showing a hand you didn't really want to see. You tipped it too far, and I saw that you have 2 aces.
Yeah, I did just look it up, and it is an accurate phrase. Tip your hand.
Tip your hand was right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Another phrase that I ran across yesterday in the cabinet meeting of the U.S. when Elon Musk was there, and he had 2 hats, and I forgot exactly what it was.
I saw a screenshot of him wearing 2 hats.
Yeah, and there was something on X. He put something on there. I've always worn multiple hats. Yeah. He says I'm wearing multiple hats, wearing 2 hats, multiple hats. I think it's multiple hats is the idiom. Someone who wears multiple hats. He says, I've always worn it. And he had a picture of him when he was 12 or 15 or something with 2 hats on, a cowboy hat on, and then a baseball cap on top of it. So he said, I've always worn multiple hats. But that's indicative of Elon Musk.
He's using it literally.
Yeah, well, literally, but literally you don't see it that way because he's talking about the multiple hats. He's Tesla and SpaceX and whatever else he's doing, the 3 or 4 things he's doing as a CEO and multi-billionaire and then working this government job for free. So it's wearing many hats. Maybe that's what it is. I've always worn many hats. He just put that picture out from when he was a kid.
What? My premise is that using idioms makes things worse. And I still haven't found an idiom that makes life better yet, so far in this conversation.
Or you haven't found one that makes life worse either. So if we're going to prove that premise, we have to either disprove it or prove it. So how does wearing many hats make it worse?
So one phrase that I think makes life worse is grubby little paws. All right. Anyone that is using that is using it to convey upset they're angry at something that someone is trying to take something or touch something, or the paws, the hands that are trying or getting into things, right? Get your grubby little paws off of this, or out of that, or away from me,
Or out of my ideas, my conversation. Get your grubby little paws out of this conversation. Even that, where they're not grabbing anything, they're not physically grabbing, and that's why they use the word paws, because paws cannot grab anything, but it means you're grabbing things you shouldn't be grabbing.
You shouldn't be grabbing,
They
and
don't
they're
call them
grubby.
grubby little fingers. Grubby. Yeah, the grubby is the disrespectful part of it. The disdain. They're grubby, and your paws. I know you can't pick anything up with it. You're just acting like you can pick up with your paw. But we don't have paws. We have fingers, and we can pick up things with fingers. You got the 5-finger discount. That kind of relates to that.
Yes. Anytime that is used, it doesn't cause anyone to think happy thoughts. It's a sad, angry thought creator.
You do mean it in an angry way. You use that for that purpose.
If you said, please don't touch my stuff, or please don't insert yourself into this topic, this conversation.
Yeah, because we know you're a narcissist and we don't want to hear from you today. So please don't talk today. Get your grubby paws out of our conversation, out of our problem. We're going to solve this ourselves. Keep your grubby paws out of it.
Right.
So that's how you'd say that.
Anytime that is used, it's just not, there's better language that you can use. And maybe there's better idioms to use. Maybe there's a category of idioms that are just negative and should stay out of life.
Should not be used. Or is it the predisposition to that, to use that idiom? In that case, can we use the narcissist in a business setting? So in a business setting, the narcissist will always take over, and every solution becomes their solution, or their information is always overruns the group. And we talked about that in hedonism. I think was one thing we used before. You don't want to overrun the group. You don't want them to overrun the group. You want the group to now study and plan this and have the narcissist just sit there. So keep your grubby little paws off of this conversation. We're going to solve this issue. When we're done, you can have a final word if you'd like. We'll be willing to listen for a few minutes. But don't overrun our work session, because that's what you always do. So is there a nice way to say that? Is there a nice way to know that that person is in the group, but we want him to keep his grubby paws out of the conversation that's happening and just listen?
I'm sure you could say you could be really generous and say, we really do need your input on this, but we're also going to include everyone else's input too. Or, it depends on the situation. There's ways to handle that kind of thing.
One way of doing that is saying, we know that you know the right answer, because you're the narcissist. You always know. You wouldn't say that.
Yeah, you never say that out
loud.
We know
that
to
you
a
know
narcissist.
How to solve this. You already know how to solve this, but we want to work through and see if there's any other synergistic conclusions we can come up with outside of that. And if you can just remain silent during this 15-minute interchange, we're going to interchange. We'll go, if there's something you need to say, please write it down, but please don't speak up, so that we can fully incorporate the group. And then we'd be happy to hear what you have to say, because we know that you already have the right answer. We just want to play for a minute. Would you allow us to play?
Now, I don't think that in real life, any of what you just said would be okay. Like that's too blunt. That's too...
Right. So in real life, how do you do it? Since I'm the one with the syndrome that makes me be more blunt than everybody else.
Yeah.
So how would you do it?
So maybe we need to role play for a minute, or I don't know, like we've got to, I need a specific situation. I'm having a meeting and we're discussing something important. Is it a company? Is it a business? How many people are in my room?
You have 4 members of your board. We've talked about your bagpipe board before. You're in a bagpipe band committee, and you guys have an issue as to whether you want to travel or not. We talked about that recently. Whether you want to take this next trip to Canada, or you want to plan it next year. You're doing it this year. Do we really want to plan it next year? I'm invited to the committee, and there I am. I'm part of the group, but I already know the answer. I already know the answer is whatever it is, yes or no.
Right. my goal is that everybody on the committee can discuss it without coming to the correct answer, which you already know.
Correct. You want to operate the way that step 6 or habit 6 indicates. You want to synergize. You want to look for a win-win, seek for a win-win to understand the whole situation, and then look for the synergy that's going to happen to give you the best answer that none of you came to the table with.
Okay. Do I know already that you know the answer and it's the correct one?
No, you already only know that I'm a narcissist and I am going to tell you my answer and I'm going to overrun the whole group if I start talking.
Oh, okay.
That's what you know. And so you want to keep me down without offending me and keeping me happy with the rest of the group.
Okay. So in that situation, if I wanted to make sure, if I was in charge, if I was running the meeting and I wanted to make sure that you spoke last, then I would say,
Or
what?
yeah, let me, one more supposition there. You feel like saying, keep your grubby paws off of our conversation.
Oh, I also feel
Okay,
a little
so
bit
what do you say?
upset about.
You do have that. You would use that phrase. In order to not use that phrase, how do you state it?
Well, I wouldn't be able to say something like that if that person if you did have a place on the board. If you were just an intruder, then I would be like, this isn't your business, so I would need you to mute yourself, be muted for a minute in this video call, I wouldn't say keep your grubby little paws out of this, but if you were a member of the board, I wouldn't say that. No. Maybe other people would, but I don't, because I think my brain believes what I say. And if I say things like grubby little paws to other people, then my brain is believing that they're that kind of person.
Now, we've talked about also this liar that's a friend of yours.
Right. Right. So I'm reinforcing my opinion. Every time I talk about this person, I'm reinforcing my opinion that they are a liar.
Uh-huh. And do they have grubby little paws in regard to their stories?
I don't think that relates. It's not
Okay, it's not a good enough idiom?
That's apples and oranges, okay?
All right. Well, that's what idioms are, apples and oranges.
Right?
Okay, maybe we need another example. And with that example, I think it's a good example still. You're questioning it.
The board meeting or the liar?
Yeah, the board meeting.
Okay.
I happen to be someone that you know is going to overrun the situation, but you want to keep my grubby little paws off of this 15-minute synergy session you're going to have.
I don't think that I would try and keep you out of it if you had a right to be there.
You would let me overrun the situation, and the other 4 people would not say a word. You and I would have a conversation just like this, and I would tell you this is what it means, and we're not going to go to Canada next year.
Yeah, that's probably how it would play out.
Yeah, and then you would say, well, I kind of agree with you. What do you guys think? Yeah, okay, meeting's over. And you never figured out the synergy of the event. You didn't meet your 7 habits of highly effectiveness goal of letting synergy come to the play. It didn't happen.
This kind of meeting would have a lot of other things leading up to it, probably a lot of background conversations. It wouldn't be guys, we're talking for the first time about whether we're going to Canada or not, so let's sit down and do it. And it probably wouldn't be one person,
overrunning the group.
Yeah, because if that person does it in this meeting, its chances are that they've done it in a bunch of meetings before. And so now we've already voted to get this guy out of the board. It's, or we just go along with whatever they say all the time and let the chips fall where they may, as they say.
Yeah, that other idiom. Which chips are we talking about? The
Right.
poker chips or the cow chips?
Or the potato chips. I always imagined it was Pringles because they fall so nicely in the commercials. And so the chips always fall perfect.
Instead of where they may. Where they may means they're disheveled.
Right.
Oblonged. And I don't know, I'm appropriately from the Southwest. I identify cow chips. That's all you're talking about.
Yeah, and maybe that is actually what it means, because that
cow
makes more sense than poker chips.
Yeah.
So we're going to have to set aside this hypothetical of
Drop
a
that
board meeting.
example. Try to find something that makes using an idiom bad that you didn't already bring to the table.
Well, grubby little paws is still bad. Like whether it's the board meeting or not, like it's not as effective.
Okay, so let's say in a group that an aunt just likes to use that phrase, and then she goes to a sensitive niece and says, "Keep your grubby little paws off this pie because we're having that for dinner."
Yeah, well, the niece doesn't like the aunt now. The niece knows what the aunt is thinking about her. And the aunt has reinforced the idea that any child is got their fingers in all kinds of things, and they need to stop touching stuff, and they're selfish, and they, all of the things that grubby little paws implies. It's not a good situation. It's not good for the aunt to say that, and it's not good for the child to receive it. It's bad. And so people should stop saying that. We should strike that out of our language, except for in historical contexts where we're talking about idioms.
Right. And if you strike it out, you can strike it out. There are good things then you could say. What are some good?
He's got a good head on his shoulders. That means that he's a smart guy. He's sensible. He's respectable. He's figuring things out. That's a nice thing to say about somebody. And it could be said, see, okay, so grubby little paws, if you replace that with what you actually mean, then it turns a bad thing neutral.
Potentially. You're trying to turn a bad thing neutral. Yeah. You're trying to use humor or color.
If you replace "he's got a good head on his shoulders" with what you actually mean, it keeps the good thing good.
Okay. So it's not idioms that are bad. It's bad idioms that are bad. Just like bad anything is bad and good anything is good.
Yeah, so I'm reminded of throwing out the baby with the bathwater. I think in this situation, good idioms are the baby and bad idioms are the bathwater. And we can throw it all out because the baby doesn't matter. It's a baby doll, actually. It's not an alive baby. And so let's just do without the good idioms too, and just everybody say what they mean with the words that actually mean what you're saying.
What that would mean is that we eliminate color from our language.
No, we would still have color. You could choose between two words that are the same thing.
Appropriate words.
You take away the confusion.
He's got a good head on his shoulders is, yeah, that's just a little bit less logical. But you don't mean that head is nice on his shoulders. You mean he thinks right. He's got a decorum in this situation. He's reading the room perfectly. All these things he's doing well. Instead of saying all those 5 things, you say he's got a good head on his shoulders. You're summarizing with a positive idiom, as opposed to saying he will overrun your situation if he comes in the room. He will talk bad about everyone. He'll have gossip to say about everything. And you summarize that into he's got grubby little hands in regard to his relationship. And you think that one would be good to use, and what you're proposing now is don't use either of those.
Don't use either of those. Because
identify the 5 things that are good or the 5 things that are bad.
Right. Just speak clearly. Speak precisely. Say what you want to say.
Precise speech. Like if it's raining cats and dogs, it's not raining cats and dogs. It is really raining horribly. Horribly. That's something you don't usually put with rain. But if you have a horrible rain.
Right. Well, and that implies a feeling that
potentially fearful.
It's not necessarily horrible if it is horrible to you, because maybe the rain is raining into your convertible that you left the top down and you're stuck. There's a flood, and so you can't get out to it. Now it's a horrible rain.
Okay. What would be just a heavy rain? A heavy rain.
That's what it would be. It's raining pretty heavily.
It's a light rain. It's a heavy rain. You have an adjective that identifies. So use your adjectives, not your idioms.
Yes, but use them appropriately. Because if you say is very an adjective or an adverb? When you use extreme words and absolute words, like you are always annoying. You are always annoying. You could just say you're annoying.
Superlatives, always, never.
Things, yeah, extra meaning words. Somebody knows what those are called, but I don't right now.
I think it's superlatives.
Okay.
I think you're getting too far. There's things you should never talk about. You should never say. You don't want to use an idiom that is always negative. And maybe that grubby paws is one that you never want to use. But that shouldn't limit you from using ones that are positive. What do you use for someone that's cheerful? Mrs. Sunshine. You're Mary Sunshine. Mary Poppins. Mary Poppins is something else. But that's kind of an idiom. It relates to things.
Little Miss Sunshine.
What did your grandmother Nana always used to say? Brighten my corners?
Yeah,
What?
put smiles in my corners.
Yeah, something like that. You brighten my corners. You never did anything to the corners, but was that a bad thing? Should you eliminate a statement like that? If it's, you always bring smiles to my corners, if that's what it was. I think it was something like brighten your corners.
I think if you have a choice where you can eliminate the negative ones and keep the positive ones, then it would make sense to keep the positive ones. But if it was a matter of keep all the negative and positive versus not have any, then I would prefer not to have any.
Because that limits choice. We're talking about agency. You have to have the agency of using the good or the bad. So if you have idioms, you're going to have good or bad. You can choose with your agency to use the good ones.
Yeah. So in conversations, in casual conversations, it makes sense to speak socially, culturally, as speak the language of your listener, right? Unfortunately, some idioms that the speaker is using may not be coming across as understandable as exactly what the speaker intended as well. So, I mean, it's difficult. It makes language hard when you're using idioms.
More difficult. And precision of speech, maybe that's what it is that's why you have an issue with it. Because you think we should say the things we mean and not beat around the bush.
Right. Don't beat around the bush. Don't dance around the topic. Just say what you mean. I think it aids in miscommunication when people are constantly littering their speech with idioms. And maybe really the only problem I have is when people are always using them instead of using them occasionally when it actually fits,
I'm reminded or drawn to the book that I'm reading now, a book I'm reading about this, because you're saying it's good to be honest with your conversations. Precision. Say what you really mean. Don't beat around the bush, but beating around the bush is an idiom that you don't want to use either. What does that mean? That means
don't avoid saying what you need to say.
What you want to say. If you want to say I love you, say I love you. Don't say hi.
Don't say as you wish, right?
Yeah,
that was
as
just
you
so
wish
confusing.
as you roll down the hill. If you mean I love you, say I love you as you're rolling down the hill. So in Plato, Socrates time, I'm reading the Republic, and in that he's talking about what does it mean to be just or unjust, and they're trying to describe what justice is. What is the just way to live, the best way to live? In other words, justice. And he says part of it starts with what you talk about, how even your fairy tales, your speech. They use the word speech here, that it's your early speech, and it's the stories that you tell your kids, the stories the kids hear. If the kids hear stories of negative idioms, that's what they're going to relate their whole life. That becomes part of their life. If they hear you bring smiles to my corners, they're going to hear those positive stories. You'd rather have them hear the positive stories rather than get your grubby little paws off of my cake. It's kind of pointed here. I'm going to just try this paragraph. I think this paragraph may describe it well, what he wants to say. He says, nor should the mothers in their turn be convinced by these things and frightened. So he's talking about stories that frighten. Neither should their mothers in their turn be convinced of these things and frighten the children with tales badly told, that certain gods go around nights looking like all sorts of strangers, lest they slander the gods while at the same time making the children more cowardly. So he's just saying that the bad things that could happen. If you tell your kids scary stories about going out at night, there's monsters under your bed, it makes them more cowardly. It not only causes them to be fearful, but it causes them to not be the man they should be. So he's talking about those stories. He says even the senseless little fairy tales, and he goes through a number of things in the Odyssey and the Iliad and Plato does, saying these phrases should not exist. We should not allow these stories to be told to our kids. There's got to be positive things, though. He is saying there's positive stories that we should promote. So I'm using that as a force against what you said. We can't throw the baby out in the bathwater. We have to identify the baby and the bathwater, get rid of the bathwater and keep the baby.
You have to be intentional and inspectional about what you're saying. Your toolbox. That's a phrase. What language do I have in my toolbox? I can only use the tools that I have in my toolbox, right?
Yeah. And if you fill your toolbox with idioms that are denigrating, damaging, disrespectful, that's not going to help you in your life. It's going to damage your life. I think that's what you meant in the first place, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it hurts. It harms. It's wrong.
Harms your life and everyone around you. But if you'll put the tools in your toolbox, which is an idiom by itself, I think it's a good idiom to use, right? You're putting the tools in your toolbox of all positive stories and positive idioms, positive connection, positive words, then you're going to benefit people by them.
I see that it makes sense to keep the positive there, to not throw the baby out. However, I still believe that it's okay if the baby gets thrown out. It's not going to do any harm if you stop using positive idioms. If you just keep using precise language, say what you mean, I think that there's no harm in just saying what you mean. How can you convince me that it's better to use a positive idiom than actually what you mean?
Than direct speech.
Do you have any examples of that?
Blunt is the word for it. So anyone that speaks directly is going to speak bluntly. They're going to tell you, that upsets me that you just said that. It's upsetting
No, positively.
That you feel that way.
Say a positive one, though. Speak bluntly in a positive manner.
I love you. I love you. So you say I love you.
That's the only one you can think of.
or you say I love you to your daughter in the wrong respect. I don't know. That's some word that you don't necessarily want to hear. Let's say you're in that board meeting.
Okay, now hold on a minute. I think we're going in the wrong direction of what I'm saying, though. You need to find a positive idiom that isn't made equal or better by using actual language.
One that isn't. So positive idioms, you brighten my corners, you bring sunshine to my corners. That's a positive idiom. And that's not exactly what she said.
I just love it. I think it's had to do with smiles, because I remember one time I visited, I drew a bunch of smiley faces on papers and actually left them in her corners.
Put them in the corner. Okay.
So that she could find them. And I'm like, here is the literal thing of what you've been saying. I did leave smiles in your corners.
Right. Okay. And that was sweet of you to do that.
Uh-huh. It was maybe my earliest pushback against an idiom.
Well, I don't know that you were pushing back. You were just pointing it out. Her idiom on that. What is it if you do something that's sweet and kind? She's a kind soul. What's an idiom to say someone is kind and sweet and generous? Because I could say that was sweet, that was kind, that was generous of you, or I could use some idiom that says that. How would you summarize that?
I really think we need to start with an idiom and figure out if it'd be better to use.
What does smiles in my corners mean? Using that one. What does that mean? I enjoy you in my house. I love your laughter.
But more than that is, after we left, she was still cheerful. She was cheered because we were there.
You bring cheer to her corners. I am happier when you're here. I feel joy because you came into my house.
Yeah, I love having you here. I'm glad that you're here. I wish that you were here all the time. I mean, this all things that
my house feels better when you're in it.
Right.
Okay, here's the idioms about that. You're a ray of sunshine. Nana talking to her grandkids. You bring smiles to my corner. You're a ray of sunshine. You have a heart of gold. You always brighten my day. You're a real lifesaver. You're just so sweet. Just so sweet. I mean, in my family, he's so sweet. And pinch your cheeks. It doesn't mean you're sweet. They're not going to try to taste that you're sweet. But sweet, that word's an idiom by itself. Calling someone sweet. It's just, you're kind, you're generous. We use the word sweet then. Using the word sweet as an idiom is a positive idiom. Perhaps you just say, I believe you are kind. You're the kindest individual I know. What you did was kind. And you'd have to find the other adjectives that make that up.
So is that not equal to saying you're so sweet?
Is it not equal? Is it worse? Would you rather not use the you're so sweet? I think that's what you're asking. Or are you asking something else?
Is there any idiom where you'd rather use the idiom, where you should use the idiom instead of the actual language?
What kind of person would you be if you didn't use that idiom? If you didn't say, you're such a ray of sunshine in my life?
A practical person.
And you would say instead, you would say...
Stoic. I would be stoic and practical.
I'm always happy to see you. Or, so good to see you. And then the person can say, it's so good to be seen. So you're just talking logically back and forth, but that's just as fun. You're always so happy when you come in, and she says, I'm not happy today. My toe hurts.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, why does your toe hurt? I'm so sorry your toe hurts. I'm so sorry your toe hurts. I mean, a logical conversation. How does your toe hurt? Is it acute or is it chronic? Be descriptive. Describe your toe to me, please, dear child, rather than saying, is it uncomfortable? Is it painful? I don't know. That wouldn't be
rather than saying, oh, that's too bad. Oh,
you poor little creature.
Right.
Come here. Let me kiss it better. Let me kiss it better. That's an idiom. You can't kiss it better.
Right.
But it's saying, I care. I care about you. I really care about that. I'd like to see it. Oh, but it's got a Band-Aid on it and it's got blood and it's gross. Okay. I don't really want to see it. I think the world would lose its color if you dealt with just...
It would turn beige, is what you're saying. I'm a advocate. I'm trying to advocate for a beige world here. That's what I thought your argument would be.
For a world that only has primary colors, because you're talking about just primary stuff. You're not going to do chartreuse or burnt orange. You're going to do orange or blue or red. Yeah, so you have the primary color world, which is still colorful, but it's not near as colorful as chartreuse and azure.
Yes, I see your point, and I think that I agree with that. I think that it makes sense that it would be less colorful if you had less idioms. I think it's entertaining. I think idioms make conversations entertaining, and it's nice to feel like you understand what they're saying when they're not actually saying what they mean, because then you feel like you're part of the inside joke, which is a really nice feeling to feel.
Yeah, and that's where we started out with the conversation of someone that's fluent. You get fluent in a community, in a culture, you know the idioms.
Those are all really nice things to have when people are speaking with idioms. I think one problem that comes up a lot is when people are using idioms, they're using it as a shortcut to what they actually want to say. Like it removes the consideration of what you're trying to say. It removes the thought. And people, they just start saying things. They start saying you can talk without thinking if you have a toolbox full of idioms,
Okay. You can, and I want to use how you end your conversations on a telephone call. You can say bye, you can say see you later. There's a number of ways to do that, or you can say I love you, goodbye, or you can say love you. You say sure do love and appreciate you. I don't know, any number of things in that toolbox, but that's color. Or you could just say what you really want to just say is goodbye. You're not trying to relay your love to somebody as you're hanging up. That's just courteous. It's a courtesy. And families do that amongst themselves at times. husbands and wives at times do that amongst themselves, but it's not good to do that. That's why it's the joke. Sometimes you're in a business call and say, love you, bye. Oh no, did I just say that
Yeah.
to your boss? And you'll hear that sometimes. It'll just fall out of someone's mouth as they're saying goodbye. And they're not really a strong relationship of yours.
Right.
So,
Oh, I accidentally did something like that kind of recently. I mean, it wasn't to my boss on the phone call, but so I frequently blow kisses to my son because he loves, that's what we do every night. I'm in bed, he's in bed, but then he gets up to do his last potty break before actually falling asleep. So he gets up and he goes to the bathroom, and as he walks by my door, he stops and says, "Good night, Mom," and he blows me a kiss. And I have to blow him a kiss too, otherwise he won't leave the doorway. So I've finished up a lesson with one of my music students, and she's like 8 years old, and so she's leaving, she's walking down the steps, and I'm like, okay, goodbye, and I blow her a kiss. I'm like, wait a minute, that's this isn't the right context for that thing, but it just happened because I do that. Yeah.
right. It's in your toolbox. It's a tool you use periodically. And so idioms could be used that way, perhaps inappropriately or just out of
Accidentally,
context.
without
Yeah.
thinking. It removes the thought. It removes the need to think about what you're saying. And maybe some people, when they're speaking, they're thinking so hard. I mean, they do use idioms correctly when they're considering which is the best idiom to use in this situation to best convince my listener of my point of view. Anyway.
Let's say you're creating a speech. If you create a speech and you're a speech writer, you're going to use the correct idiom for that, or you're going to consider 3 or 4 and change them out and put in the right one to use in your story about whatever you're talking about. If you're just talking, if you're being interviewed by someone, and so you're there in the middle of an interview and they ask you a question point blank that you weren't prepared for, it's not scripted out, ask you a question, and then your mind just starts going. You start grabbing the tools you have in your toolbox, and an idiom, a statement may come out that doesn't really match or that is offensive to people, perhaps even.
Yeah, like coagulate.
Right. Use that word. and then you have to explain it, and then it occupies the next 10 minutes of conversation trying to explain why you use that word.
Right.
They miss the whole point.
And there really was no reason. It just was in your toolbox and you reached in and you grabbed it.
Right. And it made sense. So I used it. And then it's occupied my next, that was 30 years ago at least, 20 years ago. Let's say 20 years ago.
Oh, was it that long ago?
So it was a long time, but it's still occupying my conversation.
When crafting a speech, it makes sense to use idioms that make sense. You're writing it down, you're being intentional about it, you're thinking about it, and that does add color to the speech. I agree with that. I think actually we shouldn't do away with those idioms.
Okay.
Now I've changed my mind on that. I think it's a good thing to use idioms when you're being intentional with your speech. I hate it when I see people using idioms in social media when they're commenting. They're rapid fire typing a response to something that they saw, and they're using idioms, and it's obviously not thought out. They're feeling something and they reach for the words, and it's a shortcut to, I need this thought out of my mouth, and so I'm going to use the shortcuts that I have instead of stopping and thinking, what do I mean? What am I actually feeling here? And how can I best convey that? And do I even need to convey it too? Sometimes people speak in idioms and it's not even necessary.
If you're making comments, you've got to be quick, because no one's going to read a comment that's longer than 4 words.
And nobody's going to read a comment that happened 4 hours after a main post or a video is posted. Right.
If you decide to answer it, like answers to our podcast, if anyone does make a statement, it's hard. Though I think we would respect that a little bit better than social media, for a podcast, a response to a podcast. If someone came in with a thoughtful response of something we said 4 weeks ago or a year ago and said, this is how I'm thinking about this right now, I would happily enter that conversation with them and open it up again. And that's welcomed in a podcast situation, in a social media, a chat or a thread. If you're going down a thread, there's no way that you're going to have any thoughtful communication in a thread, is what I'm thinking.
Unfortunately, that's a lot of the communication. Like that's for some people, that's the only communication they have
That's all they do.
with
They
the
have
outside
texting.
world.
You're texting, and
Yes.
you text everybody, and you can't put a paragraph in text.
Yeah. And so you use the shortcut. You use the idiom that doesn't mean anything.
Yeah. That summarizes. It's a summary, and the summary could be misinterpreted by the other side. The idiom may not mean exactly what you think it means or what you intended. Your intent may be off. The understanding may be at risk. They can't understand because you didn't use the right words that you wanted. You didn't use the precise speech.
I mean, I think I'm still going to try my hardest every day to not use idioms. They're still going to happen because they're in my toolbox still. I've been adding them in there every time I watch movies or listen to conversations. I put more in there. They're going to get used. I mean, I've got some tools in my garage that I can use and they are there, and maybe someday I'll use them for some purpose that they're not actually intended for. Like, I've got 2 sizes of oil filter wrenches for when you change the oil on your car. And I think I used them to actually change the oil filter one time, and I've used them for a bunch of other things more. Like I could use them to unscrew a peanut butter jar lid and things like that. They're
Yeah, you can use the bigger one to hold the jar and the little one to hold the lid, and it works perfectly.
right. And so, I mean, that's not their intended use. That's not their labeled use. I'm using off-label.
Yeah. Off-label. And maybe that's what idioms are. Idioms are just off-label use of language.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's off-label use.
Adding color, that's really the purpose of idioms then. And if you're going to add color, add it positively. Don't make any use of the negative idioms, because I mean the language you use really does matter. The words that you use to describe a situation, if you can choose neutral or positive words for it, then choose that, because choosing negative words just it colors them all gray and blue, and it's sad. Anyway.
Well, it could be. There's an example here on my screen. It says, happy as a pig in mud.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a happy idiom, even though it's
It's
messy.
talking about dirty, muddy, yucky stuff that doesn't smell good. It's not fun, but it's fun for the pig.
It is. If you're a pig.
Pigs look happy. Yeah. Or as, it's like pig eating slop. Slop is not a good thing to eat, but pigs love it, and they make it sound so delicious when they're eating slop. It's just such a delicious sound. But you'd never eat it. It's not something that...
Right. But I eat spaghetti that way, I think. When I'm eating spaghetti, I'm as happy as a pig eating slop.
Okay. There you go. See, and that's a good idiom. Even though it's a negative.
Well, it's dirty, but it's not negative, okay?
Okay. It's positive.
Not negative like grubby little paws.
I wanted to ask, and maybe this is something we can tie in here. What's the difference in metaphor, an analogy or metaphor, as opposed to an idiom? An idiom doesn't match at all. Metaphorically speaking,
a metaphor it would be broader than an idiom. It would be like an allegory. Those are all related words.
Yeah, allegory, metaphor, they're things that are not illogical. They're logical. It's a logical thing that happens, and it's related to this. What would be a metaphor? You're using something as example. As an example, pig eating slop is delicious. It's a positive thing. But metaphorically speaking, that's how you eat spaghetti.
Yeah, the metaphor is the pig. The pig is a metaphor for me. The slop is a metaphor for spaghetti.
Spaghetti. And the sound, the delicious sound, is what both of you create. An equivalent, beautiful sound.
Just Googled it. A metaphor directly compares two different things by stating one is the other, like time is a thief. It creates vivid images and makes abstract ideas easier to understand.
So it clarifies, clarification. You clarify with metaphor.
Right. An idiom is a phrase with a meaning that isn't obvious from the individual words, like kick the bucket for dying, pushing up daisies, Idioms reflect cultural insights and make language more colorful and engaging.
Look at that. We came up with that all on our own.
Yeah. So I think they're related. They're related, but they're not
something that has a comparison. You can compare to it, but they're not the same thing.
Yeah. Here's a metaphor for you. When deciding where things in your house go, where to organize them into, you can put them with their family, or you could put them with their coworkers, or you could put them with their cousins. Okay. So these are metaphors, like my serving fork, my salad. Yeah, the fork that you
tongs
pick up salad.
The tongs for salad. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, the tongs for salad. Those could go with all of the other tongs. Like the salad tongs could go with the barbecue tongs. That would be their family. Or it could go with the salad spinner. That would be its coworker. Or it could go with all of my other serving tools. My serving spoon and my serving knife, whatever. It could go with that. That would be its cousins. Okay?
The platters or the salad dish. It's stored next to the salad dish, the salad bowl.
And that would be its
spinner,
coworkers.
Like you said. That's the coworkers. Yeah. Okay. Or with all the other plastic deals. If it's plastic.
If it's made out of plastic.
The other things are metal. Yeah.
Yeah.
So then you're with your cousins.
Yes. So there's 3 logical places that those salad tongs could go in my house. I just need to choose one of the places. There's no right place, as long as it's not in with my socks, because that doesn't make any sense. It's not coworkers or family or cousins.
Or cousins.
Metaphor and idiom, I think, are cousins, and maybe sometimes they're coworkers.
They have a common, what's one of these definitions? I said it's a common characteristic. They share at least one characteristic. So that's coworkers. They work at the same place, but everything else is different about them. But
yeah, they're not the same thing. They're not tongs. They're not family. Anyway.
You share a characteristic as a metaphor. If an idiom would be salad tongs as a pooper scooper. I don't know.
So
get out
what
your
is
salad tongs? There's some stuff in the yard needs picked up.
Analogies versus metaphors, though, I would perhaps say that analogies and metaphors, they're family members more than metaphors and idioms. This is all stuff that anyone could Google, really.
Yeah, that's potentially. And that's all we're doing, is trying to talk about it. The usefulness of idioms, though, is our conversation. And I think we've come to the idea. You've convinced yourself that it's okay to have color and interest.
I've convinced myself. that You didn't convince me. I did it myself. That's right.
That's right.
Yes, it makes sense culturally and entertaining. It's more entertaining and more engaging if you're doing it intentionally. If I was writing a speech, I would absolutely put idioms in there.
Even if you have to explain them, I think it's still colorful. And it's interesting to the people listening, to the audience, to the hearer, to the conversant in the conversation. Even if they say, what do you mean by that? Pushing up daisies. Well, I mean, he's dead. He's under the ground. He's looking up at the daisies, potentially pushing them up.
Potentially.
Instead of picking them up, being alive. So,
however, in casual speech, I would hope that I am being conscious and intentional enough about what I'm saying to actually say what I want to say. And I suppose if an idiom is what I want to say, then that's how it will come out. That's what will come out. And you
pay attention to the audience. I mean, if you're writing a speech, you have to know who you're talking to and use the idioms they are going to understand, that you won't necessarily have to explain. When I lived in the South, we used to say this. I mean, you can do that if that's part of your story, but you don't want to use one that's supposed to be fully understood if they're not of that Southern class that they understand that use.
But it would be easier to just swear them off completely, I think. Instead of trying to think, is this idiom appropriate right now? Instead, I'd just be like, I'm going to use the actual words that I want to say. I mean, would that be easier? It'd be easier for me. Maybe it would not be easier for some people.
Would it be easier to hear the exact words?
It depends on who you are, I suppose.
You have to talk to people. You're talking to them.
I do have to talk to people.
Yeah, if they appreciate, what did you say? Bluntness. If they appreciate the blunt words, then maybe that's the right words to use. But if they appreciate fluff and small talk, maybe you should use small talk.
Yeah. Gauge your audience then. Read your audience.
Read your audience. Yeah. Get a good head on your shoulders. Read the room. That's an idiom. I mean, it means a lot.
It does.
You could say the 5 or 10 things it means, or you could just say, read the room. You spoke out of turn. You spoke out of turn. No one else was talking. Well, you spoke out of turn.
It was my turn.
Was there a card I should have picked up when I walked in the door? A number on it said, this is your turn now. But but things like that, they do open up those conversations. You can take it to its logical end. And that's what's fun about them, is the idiom can be taken to its logical end by drawing smiles in the corners of her room. You know, that's fun. And I'm sure she appreciated that too. It wasn't something that offended her in the least. She said, yeah, metaphorical and literal smiles in my corner.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think everyone knows how I feel about it now. Is there any confusion about how I feel about it still?
I believe you're fine. And I don't believe you would be happy if you eliminated idioms.
You don't think that I would?
I don't think you could be happy without idioms in your life, even.
In my personal life, knowing what you know about me, because it would be, why? What would cause unhappiness?
What would you laugh at?
Jokes. I would laugh at jokes. I'd laugh at people. I would laugh at you. Idioms aren't the only source of humor.
Okay. But no, I don't even think you could do it. I don't think it's possible.
You know, that may be true. It might be impossible to strike out all idioms.
To try to be blunt in all of your conversations. And blunt is too hard a word. You're not necessarily blunt, but to be descriptive in all of your conversation instead of, and what, verbose instead of summarizing with an idiom, like you bring sunshine to this house. You know, you bring smiles to my corners. You say, you do this and this and this and this and this when you come over. I love it when you do that. But what if I do this? Oh, I love it when you do that too.
Yeah.
You know, it's just,
that
it's
sounds
tedious.
like an equal or better situation. That transaction was just fine.
It was tedious though. It took too much time.
It depends on who you are.
Yeah, maybe you want to take that much time. You're a small talker. You just love all the small talk words. You can say more words.
I imagine there are people that just hate the tediousness of conversation and they'd much rather just communicate with emojis anyway. So
right. They don't want to turn over every rock. There's possibly people who don't like these conversations you and I are having. That's possible. I can't imagine it, but
you can't imagine it because you're not them, so it's difficult.
Yeah.
It's difficult to put yourself in someone else's shoes.
It's possible that they would say, 2 minutes on idioms is plenty. It's an hour and a half. That doesn't make any sense at all.
Yeah. Well, you can use ChatGPT to create a summary of this for you, for yourself, if you just can't handle an hour or more.
Our AI summaries are still 4 or 5 paragraphs long. And that's
I choose that length.
The length?
It tells
You
me
choose
how
the
long
length.
would you like this, and I'm like 10,000
Yeah.
words, please.
Okay.
So it could be shorter. I just prefer the longer ones, really.
Right.
It's not 10, it's only
Right.
1,000 words is what, but as opposed to 250, you know. Well, this is a matter of personal preference, I think. I think I prefer it when people say what they mean, and I receive that best when they're not using idioms, but they maybe, I mean, this general they, there are people in my life who would prefer to hear idioms instead of what I mean, actually. They want me to beat around the bush, maybe. They want me to dance around the subject. And I'm uncomfortable doing it. And maybe we just don't spend so much time together because we communicate differently.
Well, it is subjective. You've got to change it. There's not an absolute. If you try to be in it, and that's maybe what I'm battling against more than anything else here in this conversation is I don't think you can say absolutely I'm just going to do this. I'm going to live this way without idioms. That absolute life is always going to be bad, or an absolute life always with idioms.
That's true. There's no absolute best way to do it because we're all individuals. And just like those personality books and the five love languages and you the goal isn't to know yourself and then make everyone treat you how you want to be treated. The goal is to know yourself and also know all of the other ones and find a balance, be a little bit of everything, right?
Be able to speak rainbow, even though you know that you're red. I'm primarily red, but I can speak white. If I'm with someone white, I want to be more white. And if they're positive and win-win about it as well, they're going to want to be more red when they're with a red.
So this just plays into all of that. This is a part of that.
Awareness. It's probably the awareness idea. You want to be aware. You want to read the room and see what happens, who people are, what they're asking for. If they say an idiom, then and you don't understand it, like they're not pushing up daisies. They're dead. That's what I meant. And you can stay dumb in that thing and say, no, you, sir, are the idiom. Or you can say, wow, that's what that means, huh? Is that colloquial around here? You guys use this in Italy, pushing up daisies? Yeah, we do. Oh, okay, cool. Now I know.
Right. All right. Do you have anything else you want to say about this?
Yes.
Okay.
No, I don't. I
Oh.
don't know that there's anything else to say. Yes. The only thing I was thinking compared to metaphor, which we did, and it ties in with everything else, just the fact that it is subjective. There's not a true way to live based on idioms, just like there's not a true way to live on anything else.
Yeah.
You pick your principles, you're subjective in that, and you pick how you live and operate with it. But you do have to live with everyone else in the relationships you choose to maintain.
Yeah. We're sharing this existence with all kinds of other thinking human beings, right?
Yeah. Idiomatically saying we're sharing air with everybody.
Yes. Yeah. All right.
Okay. Good.
Well, cool. Thanks for talking with me
Sure.
on this.
I enjoyed it. I
Yeah,
enjoyed it
I'm glad.
immensely. And if hopefully everyone else enjoys this too.
Yeah, well, I'm sure that there will be some people that do enjoy it, and then some others that are, this is just not their cup of tea, and I mean, I still appreciate them stopping by anyway. Like, it's too
All
bad that
those
I'm
idioms
saying this. I know.
you're just throwing out. You just
I'm just
flow right off
throwing
your
it out.
tongue like you're just not even thinking.
I'm so good at it. This is yeah, no, it's too bad that we're showing appreciation to our verbal appreciation towards our listeners here at the end of the episode because anyone who didn't like this will stop in the first 30 seconds.
Would not get here. Yeah.
They're not even going to get to this point.
I'm always interested when the people say, well, we're glad that you got this far.
Yeah. And it's like, well, I did. I got this far. We should hand out like keywords. If you made it to the 45-minute point, I'm going to shout out a keyword and that you enter that for, internet points maybe. You could start racking up a score on our website.
Whether that's a gimmick that's been used, I don't know that the gimmick's ever been used. I haven't heard of it.
You haven't heard it.
No.
Yeah.
And I don't know that it would work. I would just call it a gimmick, and I would vote no.
Yeah, well, I think it would be fun. So somebody gave someone a book to read. This is a story that I'm remembering, and I don't remember who it was, but somebody was given a book to read, and in the middle of it, there was a paper. Maybe you told me this story. There was a paper that said, "Call me when you get to this point." Then the person that was reading it got to that point and called the person. He's like, "I just wanted to make sure that we're actually reading the book, because I give books to people, and sometimes they just never get to it. They never read it." I don't know. That might not have been the point, but yeah, putting a keyword in the middle of an episode for someone to listen
That
for.
makes sense. It is just it's a trick, a gimmick.
A trick to make people listen, right? That's
Right. Or
like the
to try to
radio
entice
show.
them to listen. Yeah, radio shows.
Yeah, they do the keywords 3 times a day so that you can enter to win. At the end of the day, you call in and give the 3 keywords so that you can enter to win a prize. Yeah, we're not, our income isn't dependent on this conversation happening. And
Even if it was, I think that's more of a gimmick thing. I'd rather that people listen because they are intrigued and enjoy the conversation, rather than they're looking for keywords.
yeah, intentional. You want them to be intentional and conscious about it.
Right. And aware of what they're doing.
Gimmicks are shortcuts to engagement.
Right. And AI will break that gimmick thing. You could say, AI, listen to the radio all day long and tell me the 3 keywords. And you can put that into AI 5 minutes before the call time, and then be the first one on the phone. Say,
That's just another reason to hate AI.
Because you can't play those gimmicks anymore. Gimmicks don't work.
Yeah. Okay. Well, our website is doyouhaveaminute.podcast.com. The link to the blog for this particular episode will be in the show notes wherever you're listening to this, and leave a comment if you feel like it anywhere that you're listening to this, and maybe that provider will tell us that there is a comment, and the best place would be on our website, though, because that's there. It's alive.
Right. We watch the website.
Yeah. Anyway. All right. Well, that's it for now.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Good night.
Bye.